Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, September 13th, 2021. The September 11th weekend is over, and I'm glad and good. Happy to be with it behind us. I don't know how much time, if any, you spent over the weekend watching the 9/11 remembrance stuff, but I don't know. I didn't find it a good use of my time, certainly. Not that that prevented it from being much written about in the news, but I was grateful that it was Saturday, that one, we didn't have to broadcast, and two, that Sunday could intervene before we were back on Monday, such that the Saturday remembrance or reactions to the way various people remembered September 11th was old news by the time Monday rolled around. That didn't stop anybody from covering it, but it just had the feeling of older news, and that's good. Let's see. The current president and the ex-president's club basically showed up as expected at the various remembrances in New York, in Washington, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and all the places that responsible presidents and ex-presidents are supposed to be, except for the very last one, the former guy who, I don't know, I guess he sort of woke up late and saw in the news that the other presidents were doing things and said, well, maybe I can squeeze in an appearance in one of those cities, if not at the actual site of the memorials in those cities, if any, and get that done before I head back where? I don't know. Was it Florida that he went to for the main event, like literally the main event of the evening, which was providing, I guess you could call it color commentary. I assume the color was orange commentary and a boxing match on pay-per-view TV featuring Evander Holyfield, who I think they said was 58 years old, making a comeback of sorts, and it didn't work very well. But anyway, I don't know, several hundred Americans, I assume, paid like $50 to watch a 2-minute fight, because that's how long it lasted, with Evander Holyfield, with Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. Providing commentary. So luckily, I guess the fight didn't last very long. You didn't have to listen to a lot of his commentary, and apparently it was pretty boring. I don't know how boring you can get in 2 minutes, but, well, we just tried. You tell me. Maybe we were worse. At any rate, what can you do? He's an idiot and a psychopath, and he has no concept of what would be appropriate on November 11th. So I think he actually went to New York, where he has an apartment. I don't know if you know about that. But I don't know, and I'm not even certain where he went from. I think he's been staying maybe at the New Jersey golf course lately. It's almost time to start heading down to Perv-a-Lago for the Perv season. And so I suppose he's almost ready to do that. So he made his way to New York. He didn't go to Ground Zero, although the way you know he wasn't going to go to Ground Zero was that apparently on Friday he gave an interview to some outlet or another, and they said, are you going to go to Ground Zero tomorrow? And he said, I'm planning on, or whatever. I'm not certain what he said, but it caused the outlet to run with the headline of Trump indicates that he may go to Ground Zero on Saturday, which means he won't. 2 weeks. I'll go in 2 weeks on September, whatever. I guess October, early October. Anyway, 14, 11. Yeah. Okay. That's not enough days in September. So, anyway, he went to New York for no particular reason, but he decided, I guess, to go visit a police precinct nearby-ish to Ground Zero. And the police and firefighters came out to, take thumbs-up pictures in their red hats and stuff. Not like firemen red hats. They actually don't wear red hats anyway, but you might think they do. But they don't. But they were out with the stupid red hats, the disease hats. The one that has COVID in the lining, in the brim. And, taking thumbs up pictures with him because, after all, 9/11 is all about, taking pictures with Donald Trump for whatever reason. So big grinning pictures, no masks, of course, all the cops and everything. In fact, Trump made a comment about it and said, if I get COVID again, it's because of you. So, he was doing what in his world passes for joking, I guess, sort of, except that's actually highly likely. A lot of the cops, they're highly infected among the cops, and I don't know about the firefighters or what, in terms of what they're doing with, or how they're doing with COVID. But cops, it's actually was like, I think, the number one cause of death among active duty police officers in the last year or so. Not that they would admit as much. They are, of course, dedicated to telling everybody that they're all being shot by Antifa, but they're not. And they're not doing anything about stopping themselves from dying from COVID either, among one of the less vaccinated professions out there. So that's how Donald Trump spent his day. I'm surprised he didn't throw some paper towels to him while he was out there. But Greg Dworkin is here with real, actual, data-driven coronavirus news versus that one guy that we don't like, and he didn't wear a mask, and where was he on Saturday? Who cares? I shouldn't have wasted my time with this. Anyway, Greg is here to save us from that. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Speaking of wasting your time,
yeah,
let me waste your time with two other 9/11 memorials, or at least events that happened on 9/11. One of which is that same former guy who gave a virtual address to the Unification Church, otherwise known as the Moonies, and that was aired at least on 9/11. I don't know when he gave it. But one cult speaking to another in a cult summit, that was kind of interesting.
That is
and
interesting.
One of the other notable memorials was Rudy Giuliani getting drunk out of his mind and giving a 9/11 anniversary speech in which he did impressions of the Queen.
Yeah,
and other things. I mean,
that was good.
He was like, I can't stand up drunk.
I was wondering what was going on with his speech. I just was like, I think he's physically deteriorating, and that may be true also. But and I suppose it's only worsened by being drunk. But that is what kind of he does these days.
Right. Well,
I did see this. That's right.
Pretty much the worthiness of his entire contribution to America.
Yes.
In the last 19 and a half years.
Right.
As a native New Yorker and somebody who followed his career closely, and those who live in the city still remind us, he was always awful. And then he was made a hero because we needed one. Right. And, glossing over the fact that he put the emergency center away from Brooklyn and into the World Trade Center and made sure that the radios were such that the cops and the firemen couldn't talk to each other, among other things. So, you need a hero, he's going to be a hero. And then he is who he is, and that all came out.
Yeah. Trump also put out a written statement somehow of some kind congratulating Rudy Giuliani on 9/11, saying congratulations for the 20th time on the anniversary. I guess he thought he did a good job.
Well, don't forget what he has in mind. Remember, on 9/11, Trump said, now my towers are bigger.
Right, and they weren't. But anyway, yes. Then he stole some 9/11 relief money. Yeah, all the good things we remember about him.
So, congratulations.
Do not congratulate.
Enable me to do this just as you've been enabling me over the last 4 years.
Yep. And also in the audience for the Giuliani speech, I think I did see a clip of the speech where he did the imitation of the Queen of England for whatever reason, and then he went on to just...
He should keep his day job.
Yeah.
And actually, he should lose his day job, but he shouldn't use that as a day job.
But he switched over to an unprompted denial of ever having been with Prince Andrew and young girls. Okay, I don't think anybody... All right. I mean, I wouldn't put it past you or anything, but nobody asked. But thank you for denying it. You know what that usually means. So I guess he was reminded by his imitation of the Queen. But still, anyway. So he looked for verification of that claim to his character witness in the audience, convicted felon Bernie Kerik, who, of course, had his own... Well, he was, of course, in office in 9/11. And then, speaking of offices in 9/11... You'll probably all remember the story of the apartment nearby Ground Zero that was donated supposedly as a respite for rescue workers which he kicked them out of and instead turned into a sex nest for himself and his mistress. And that was his character witness. Didn't I? It's true, right? He said, I never once with Prince Andrew or young girls. Well, there was the one time, but it was just because, right, Bernie? You know. All right, whatever, man.
So let's talk about other things. But, it was hard to escape the September 11th memorial on Saturday. And even though one would like to, I still find it very raw. I mean, I still remember people I lost there during the tower thing and how our hospital prepped for patients that never came. And I don't find it particularly pleasant. I suppose it's important. Memorials are important. But I think more important than that are the retrospectives about what did we get wrong.
Yeah.
And, again, given the fact that David and I are Iraq War era bloggers, where the dirty effing hippies got it right but were ignored in Freedom Fries, and you really still had to worry about being pseudonymous or keeping your pseudonymity online because the vindictiveness that we see today really started then. Yep. And, I think a lot of that is important to remember. But I do find there are other stories. This one was in Politico magazine. They created our post 9/11 world. Here's what they think they got wrong. 17 prominent players reflect on the decades of war they helped wage and the domestic defenses they helped erect. And there's a number of people that they interviewed. They didn't interview everybody important that they could have, like George W. Bush, who gave an interesting speech that he should get credit for on September 11th because, he pointed out that domestic terrorism is like a big deal.
Yes.
And I think that, give him credit for that. And I give him credit for PEPFAR, and I give him credit for flu prep and trying to deal with pandemics. And, he was still the architect of what happened in Iraq and everything that went wrong that led to Afghanistan and everything that went wrong. And so there's definitely a tie-through that should be explored, and that's why it's important to do so. So I'm glad those stories are starting to come out a little bit. I listed a whole bunch of them on Saturday in the Saturday Pundit Roundup, and we don't need to go over that again. Again, it's sort of past that. And by the way, you don't see a lot about the Afghanistan withdrawal now that there are commercial flights leaving.
No, I guess you don't. I don't know if there's any video, but
there's 80,000 Afghans that have been brought out. Arguments on the right are, first we said you should take them out because there's 50,000. Okay, well, we got more than that. Okay, well, you got more than that, but you didn't get the right ones. Okay, well, you got the right ones, but now you're not doing the right thing. It's just, it's a never-ending moving target of what exactly is it you want. Well, we should have stayed. Okay, well, why don't you just say that? Because there's really no argument for that, and the American people don't want that. And remember that Afghanistan was going to be the defining issue that was going to change the Biden presidency. And, of course, a week and a half later, like, where?
Yeah. Well, that didn't work all that well.
No. Here's New York Times. The legacy of America's post-11 turned to torture. That's important because it's the first time in 20 years the New York Times used the term torture.
Yeah, right. I guess we just had to end all the wars that were using it, and then we were allowed to use it. Don't use it during. We don't want to affect the polling about the war or something.
Yeah, it's bad for morale. 20 years after the attacks, the United States is still grappling with the consequences of brutal interrogations carried out in the name of national security. That's George W. Bush, so I applaud him for the speech, but he's the guy that approved it.
Yes, I mean, sort of. He was around, and Dick Cheney did it, and we were supposed. There are people saying his daughter's a hero.
Here's where I disagree with you. I get the role that Dick Cheney played.
Yeah.
But W doesn't get off the hook.
Oh, no, he's not off the hook.
By saying, it was Cheney and Rumsfeld.
No, he can't do that.
It was W. He was president.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I just sort of envision it along the lines of, what do you guys want to do? Well, let's do some torture. All right.
Well, and I'm just firmly against the buck stops here when it's a Democrat, but when it's a Republican, it's like everybody else who did him wrong, and it's not really his fault because he had this great vision, and they just, failed him. Well, no, it was him. He was in frickin' charge.
Well, no, I mean, he didn't have a vision. I don't think he had. I don't think like, oh, he had a great vision, but he was distracted from it by bad advisors. He had no vision, and he had bad advisors, and he's an idiot. And I don't know whether he, sat up in the middle of the night and said, "We should torture people, folks."
I don't know if you saw this, but on September 10th, when they were doing a retrospective, as many people did, as we've been talking about, Shibli Talami posted this. I just gave you the link. Brookings Institute Bruce Rydell, who was former special assistant to President George W. Bush when 9/11 attack occurred, breaks news at our Sadat Forum on September 14th, just 3 days after the 9/11 attack. President Bush told a stunned British Prime Minister Tony Blair, "We're going to attack Iraq."
Yeah, I mean,
Iraq.
Yeah.
Right? We just get hit with 9/11 attackers from Saudi Arabia who were pushed and prodded by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And we're going to attack Iraq 3 days later.
Say that.
George W. Bush.
Right.
So, no, you don't get off the hook.
Well, I don't know why you insisted on letting him off the hook, but
I'm just telling America.
That's done.
It was a great speech. I love it. But, if you say Cheney Rumsfeld and you leave Bush out, you're doing it wrong. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, well, talk to somebody who does that, and then you'll be on the right target.
Okay. There you go. So, me yelling at David for something he didn't do was far more interesting than commentary about a 2-minute fight.
I guess so. All right.
We'll have our own 2-minute fight. Okay, it's over. So, that's the background for a lot of this stuff. I think the bigger story right now is the Biden vaccine mandate and all that implies. It's good politics. It's good policy. Washington Post story leads off with Biden thought he could persuade vaccine skeptics. He couldn't, so he embraced mandates. On Thursday, Biden abandoned his initial strategy, instead embracing the growing frustration among the vaccinated with the country's roughly 80 million unvaccinated citizens, and announced a sweeping set of mandates, including compelling businesses with more than 100 workers to require vaccinations on or weekly coronavirus testing. The or weekly coronavirus testing is important because you have an out. And you have an off-ramp. You don't want to get vaccinated, just get tested.
Super expensive. Yeah. And your company will eventually say, we're not paying for that anymore.
Right. So, the expense of those tests is part of what I have here. Here's an NBC News piece, since you brought it up, because it's important, and so it's good that you did. Why do COVID rapid tests cost so much even after Biden's push for lower prices? Germans pay less than $1 a test. Brits get them for free. Why do Americans pay so much more? Because companies can demand it.
Okay.
Right? If you get currently probably the cheapest way to do it is $15 a pop. If you get the Abbott Laboratory Binex Now, which is a 2-pack for $23, right? It's like $12 each. But if you have to test yourself once a week, that could be $50. If you have kids and you're trying to do it for school, you can run into like the hundreds of dollars. So, there is an off-ramp, but the incentive there is to, if you don't want to spend the money, just get the damn vaccine.
That's true. That is free.
Yeah.
That freedom comes for free. That is still covered, I think. I don't know how long they have to do that for free, but I guess
CDC studies, by the way, find that even with Delta, Moderna was 95% effective against hospitalization, 92% effective against infection. Excellent. That's important. I'm going to come back to that. Notably better than Pfizer and much better than J&J. And I have a whole thing here about J&J folks and what they're supposed to do, rounding up the information. The CDC is not discouraging J&J people from getting a booster. You can't get one yet. You can't find it. You sort of have to lie about, your previous status in order to walk in a pharmacy and stuff like that. But that's doable. And somebody asked Rachel Walensky, the head of CDC, about, what they should do. And she didn't exactly say that you shouldn't.
Okay.
It's sort of like, what if I go ahead and lie about it? Well, I don't think you're doing terrible harm.
All right. Well, we may have to do that, sometime soon. We have a J&J-er in the household. Yeah,
here's the exact quote. During a podcast interview this summer, Rochelle Walensky, director of CDC, declined to discourage J&J recipients from seeking out a Moderna or Pfizer shot. She said there's not enough data to be sure. when Andy Slavitt, the podcast host and a former Biden advisor, asked her whether she would describe it as a huge mistake, she said, no, not with what I've seen so far.
It's not huge. Okay.
No.
Or a mistake. Okay.
But can you get one? Well, that's a different story.
Yeah, that's what I now need to research. Like, can we
some people will do it, some people won't. The issue is, you have very prominent infectious disease docs and or other officials basically saying, well, I got the J&J and then I went ahead and got a mRNA vaccine booster, and I think it's safe, even though sometimes you have to make decisions even though you don't have all the information. And I think regular folks look at that and say, you mean there's a two-tier system. If you're like a doc, you can do it, and if I'm a regular person, I can't.
I guess, but...
So the bottom line...
maybe you can.
Maybe you can. The New York Times summing up, here's the briefcase for getting one. The available evidence suggests you'll benefit. There's no signs of worrisome side effects. And the Delta variant is a bigger threat to human life than earlier versions of the coronavirus. So by waiting, you may be allowing bureaucratic caution to get in the way of your own health. And the case against the shot is a single shot still provides good protection. The government may soon allow a second J&J shot. There's not rigorous data on the benefits and risks of mix and match, and you may need to resort to some deviousness to get another shot. So we understand why everybody's flummoxed.
All right, we're flummoxed.
So I think that's a pretty fair summary. But you got to do what you got to do, and it's partly people just aren't used to the idea that we don't know everything, and public health officials and especially politicians are simply not used to saying, well, we don't know everything yet. Here's what we know based on what we know so far. Here's what we recommend based on what we know so far. And here's why we change recommendations. And it's very messy because reporters like everything tied up in a bow. And the fact is that you're making decisions on the fly with a changing environment. Decisions you made about Alpha don't apply to Delta. And, you got to go with the information you have. And if you're transparent and truthful about it, you can get away with it. And if you're not, you can't. So while the Biden administration is pushing these mandates, what I wrote this morning on Twitter, the first wave of Republican reaction is hell no to mandates, outrage. And as they prove to be acceptable because companies are finding they work or they're okay with it, then we're into the second wave, which is gaslighting. It's a terrible political decision. Look at this poll over here, or look at those 5 people over there who resigned, or look at these 7 people who sued. And they basically fear the mandates are going to be effective, and that's their main concern, so they'll do anything they possibly can to try to get on top of that.
Interesting.
Here's a study or at least a report about a study in the New York Times. Federal research bolsters the case for vaccine mandates. Scientists believe that administration's new measures may tamp down the pandemic, although the effects won't be immediately obvious.
Aha.
Okay. So Kevin McCarthy says no mandates.
It's immediately obvious.
And Aaron Blake says a logical question is to at what point this oversimplified talking point leads Republicans to actually start objecting to MMR vaccines and everything else. Because there are mandates for that.
Yeah.
You can't send your kids to school without those other vaccines. So this isn't new.
No. Some interesting observations by a lot of watchers saying, well, it does fit in with the rest of the Republican campaign against public education in general. But, yeah, I think it was just knee-jerk. No mandates that makes people upset or something people rally around without thinking about all of the ones that they've been mandated to take in the past. So it's nonsensical, obviously.
Well, the basic underlying theme here from the public health folks is that vaccine hesitancy, for whatever reason, a diverse group of people who have different reasons for not wanting the vaccine, but whatever it is, not getting vaccinated is prolonging the pandemic. So you got to take steps to overcome that. And if one of those steps is mandates, so be it.
Yeah, well, especially the way they're structured. And they're extraordinarily popular. And I even read polling on Friday when you weren't here, and it said so.
Yeah, it's pretty popular.
Yeah.
Interestingly, CNN had a poll out, which we're going to talk about. More than half of Americans not only like mandates, but even with the weird way it's worded in the poll questions, it's a rising number of people who are okay with it, depending upon where you ask for it. People are much more okay with it. For example, in specific areas like the workplace, 54%, students, 55%, sporting events or concerts, 55%. Fewer, 41%, support requiring vaccinations for a shopper to enter a grocery store. You know, and I could sort of agree with that. It's hard for me to say that you can't get food if you don't get vaccinated. That's a little harsh.
Yeah.
You have to wear a damn mask, but, you know, I'm not going to ask you to prove you're vaccinated before you go grocery shopping. But school, yeah, that's a different story. Yeah. Also, support for those mandates has risen across the board since April, growing 6 percentage points with students, 8 points with office workers and events, and 15 points with grocery shoppers, which is interesting. Of course, there's a sharp resurgence of concern about the coronavirus. Josh Krasauer, one of the conservative commentators, said, "Oh, look at this. This just shows that right-wing opposition is going to rise and it's going to be a problem for Democrats, because everything is a problem for Democrats."
Sure. Why not?
But here's, you know, what's underlying that. In that same poll, Aaron Blake points out 27% of Republicans say the pandemic is over. 73 say it's not, but 27 say it's due, compared to Democrats where it's 97.3.
Yeah. Yeah, same, you know, again, same number where you always say a quarter
confusion,
of the people
gaslighting.
will say anything.
I mean, you know, the problem here is you can't give Biden a win, so whatever it takes.
Right. Okay. Well, although, I mean, it's interesting. What if you tell the 27%, well, saying the pandemic is over means Joe Biden beat the pandemic. Oh, in that case, the pandemic is not over. Good. There you go. Now you're on the right page. Get a vaccine. But, all right, good. Well, the mandates rolling out. People seem frustrated that they haven't been rolled out earlier, in fact, and are ready for them, and they make sense, and that's good. I guess we'll see how that plays.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Gil. Minimal contributor to content, but regular contributor to funding for Kagro in the morning. Let's change things up from David's so very tired plea for your contributions with a plea of my own. If you want to add your voice to the show, do it. Record your own segment using your favorite recording device and send it to David. Read an article and give your opinion. Write your own essay and read that. The sky's the limit. Well, not really. Try to keep it relatively short so David doesn't have to stress about cutting it and hurting your feelings. Join the hallowed ranks of Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter and be part of this somewhat witty deep dive into political topics with unnecessary censoring. Lend your voice to the show by sending it to kagrox@gmail.com. KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We found out how the vaccine mandates played. Pretty good, I asked.
Yeah, they did. You know, that CNN poll was taken prior to Biden's actual announcement. Now, one story that's circulating this morning, I think we should just make mention of. This is from CNN, but you can find it elsewhere. There's an upstate New York. It says New York Hospital, but, you know, me being a New York City kid, I got to say that's upstate New York, near Syracuse. New York Hospital to pause baby deliveries after resignations over COVID-19 vaccine mandate.
I see.
Lewis County General Hospital in Lowville, about 60 miles northeast of Syracuse, will stop deliveries after September 24th. We're unable to safely staff the service. The number of resignations received, which is 30 hospital system employees, and I think 6 in that area. It's a very small hospital. Because the whole system employs 165 people. So vaccine rate is now 73%, 165 employees not yet vaccinated, something like 96% with the docs, and it's not clear what they will do. Now, what's interesting about that, first of all, is that rural hospitals are always having staffing issues. And secondly, when you look at the county that the hospital resides in, Lewis County, you have to remember that especially support staff and nurses, even more than the doctors, are a product of the county they live in.
I guess they are.
Right? So County Board of Canvassers of the County of Lewis, in relation to the votes cast in the general election November 3rd, 2020, Donald J. Trump got 8,890 votes. Joe Biden got 3,823. So it's a heavily Trump area.
What a dumb county.
One of our political commenters noted it's the second reddest county in New York by 2020 Trump margins. It's the second lowest COVID vaccination rate in New York.
Also, duh.
It's the whitest county in New York. And it's part of Police Stefanek's congressional district.
Okay, well...
Now, is that relevant? Yeah, it is, because if you're drawing your personnel from that pool, you're going to get a lot of vaccine resistance.
Yes.
I mean, you can't not. So you just have to factor that in and say that's part of what's going on here.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does make some sense. That's the best card that these anti-vaxxers, or at least anti-mandate people, appear to have to play, is insisting that vital people in vital areas, all sorts of, many different walks of life, are resigning rather than get the vaccine. Now, if they were taking care of critical care patients,
in most places they're not. You see, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's their story, and it's just not happening, generally speaking. But
right.
There's
Here's
always
CNN.
a couple
Here's who loves Biden's vaccine mandate: companies.
Yeah.
Corporate America has been trying to navigate two competing pandemic realities. Companies are desperately trying to get back to business as usual, and mandating vaccines is among the best ways to do that. But a labor shortage has tied their hands, as businesses have been worried that forcing people to get the shot would send some new hires packing. State and local governments had imposed various vaccine mandates. Others had banned them, and all the while vaccines become politically charged. All that made universal corporate vaccine mandates difficult, but Biden solved that problem for them this week. So they love it. Business Roundtable and other groups just totally endorsing it. This one is from CNBC. Delta Airlines $200 per month experiment for changing unvaccinated employees' minds for charging unvaccinated employees seems to be working. In the 2 weeks since Delta Airlines announced the $200 monthly health insurance surcharge for unvaccinated employees, 20% of Delta's unvaccinated employees have already gotten the jab. That's a huge number in terms of shifting the group that's most reluctant. Of the airline's 80,000 employees, 20,000 still remain unvaccinated. But getting 20% to join the club, that's great.
Yeah. It's I'm glad it's working well, and there's very quick response. I saw the very aptly named Delta Airlines had imposed its mandate, and they have no resignations and a huge increase in uptake of the vaccine among their employees. So
right. So when you read the story of the upstate hospital with 6 employees in maternity closing the unit down, which was threatening to close down anyway because it's hard to staff, put that in perspective with what Delta and the Business Roundtable and other airlines are telling us. Right.
And of course, everybody wants their babies delivered by unvaccinated COVID deniers.
Right. So, well, if you live in that community, again, if you're a heavily Trump community, which is anti-vax, then just keep that in mind. So I think, again, that's important perspective to do. A couple of other things to talk about, and one of them, I think, is the upcoming tomorrow formal deadline for the month-long California recall.
Oh, like the election day? Is that what they call it now?
Yeah,
the formal
like
deadline.
I think they came up with this new term for endpoint, and they called it election day.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, because now it's
which is not really election day because
over.
You still don't find out who wins for a while.
End of the election day.
Yeah.
All right.
So L.A. Times, Newsom stakes his future on one simple argument: fear a GOP governor.
You should.
Polls are looking good for him. Gavin Newsom warned in the Bay Area that electing Larry Elder would have deadly consequences for Californians amid the still raging COVID pandemic. Yes. Remember, a quarter of Republicans think it's over already. In L.A., he painted the recall as a battle against Trumpism that could plunge the state into an uncharted near-apocalyptic future. And in ads, his campaign has cautioned that failing to vote could mean the state ends up with an anti-vax Republican governor. Guess what? It's working.
All right.
That's exactly the right way to run. And there's more Democrats that ought to adopt the whole idea of running against Trumpism, because whether or not Trump is a candidate, Trumpism is around right now, and it's perfectly appropriate to run against it.
Sure. Do it. I don't know why anybody wouldn't. I mean, I know who won't, but I don't know why. I mean, yeah, I assume that Abigail Spanberger, for instance, well, kitchen table, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Well, let me tell you something. Everybody at my kitchen table, hates Donald Trump and is afraid of a future where Trumpism rules. So, talk to him.
That little bleep sound that may come across on the podcast is me sending a graph over to David on the recent 538 polling. Do Californians want to remove Gavin Newsom from office? Keep 57.5, remove 40.8. That's a 16.6 gap in favor of Gavin Newsom, and that's way different than what we saw in August, just a month ago, when it was virtually tied.
Yeah, I see from the chart. But, yeah, they did the job of reminding people, this isn't like, should we get rid of him and start over with a whole big election? It's, if you get rid of him, you're going to get this guy. Oh, crap. All right. Well, that changed things. And rightly so. They also could stand to change their recall procedures there in California. And I think people
It's a terrible system.
Yeah. It's pretty dumb.
Yeah. So, there have been polling misses, so nothing is guaranteed. But what Newsom has done is he's changed the issue from a referendum on me, because I had dinner in a really expensive restaurant, and more a referendum on who would replace me and what would they do. Do you really want that? Perfectly appropriate, well executed, well funded.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where I don't think people are assuming he's going to win, but Republicans are already running against the fact that there was fraud in this election that hasn't even happened yet, and there must be, because how else could we lose? Which I think is, indicative of an underlying problem. Greg Sargent had pointed this out. The issue underlying all of this is a philosophical one. As a matter of fact, I have I think I put aside a Thomas Zimmer, a sociologist, historian.
It sounds familiar from today. Let's see. All
right. Here. So is this really how it's going to be? The plumb line GS, that's Greg Sargent, asked in this crucial piece, is GOP candidates are openly casting any potential election losses as illegitimate. The answer, sadly, has to be yes, because this is what the Republican Party has become. Mm-hmm. It's tempting to describe the Republican candidates in this piece as fringe outliers, like Larry Elder in California, as either deranged Trumpists or as cynical opportunists who simply want to emulate Trump's approach. But there's more going on here. Remember, undermining the legitimacy of democratic elections in such blatant fashion does not get these people in trouble within the Republican Party.
Right, yes.
Why is that? That's because many Republican officials and at least half of Republican voters share the underlying ideology. It's become a core tenet of the Republican worldview that democratic governance is fundamentally illegitimate. To define the Democratic Party as not simply a political opponent, but fundamentally un-American enemy who must not be allowed to destroy real America.
And that has its roots in George W. Bush's term.
Yep. Many Republicans might be uncomfortable with the idea of undermining elections in blatant fashion, and they may not subscribe to the outlandish claims of voter fraud, but fundamentally they agree that democratic governance is illegitimate. To Republicans, the specifics of the, as Larry Elder calls them, shenanigans, fake ballots, lost ballots, illegals voting, matter less than the higher truth. Only the GOP stands for real America, and the other side seizing power can't be right. The diffuse ideas of fraud are resultant manifestation of this underlying belief. They gain plausibility not because of empirical evidence, but because they adhere to the higher truth of who is and who is not legitimately representing real America. The belief that democratic governance is fundamentally illegitimate rests on two ideas. The democratic political project is radically un-American because Democrats are trying to turn what's supposed to be a white Christian nation into a land of multiracial pluralism. And the democratic political project is fueled by a coalition of people who don't deserve their place. If it weren't for the support of these illegal, undeserving, un-American forces, Democrats would stand no chance against real America. And that's Sarah Palin. And that's what Republicans really mean when they speak of themselves as the only representatives of real America. None of this is new, exactly. The reason Trump's big lie can flourish and have such a massive effect is because it can build on long-standing anti-democratic tendencies on the American right. and latch on to the decades-long attempts by Republicans to present themselves as the only legitimate representative.
Yes, long time coming, as we said.
Long time coming. It's not just Republican politicians. There's a distinctly Trumpian wing openly disregarding anybody who voted for Biden, declaring half the population not worthy of inclusion in the body politic. And what we're seeing now both is and is not the legacy of Trump. As always, Trumpism represents a radicalization, but it's not an aberration. It's crucial to recognize the underlying ideological basis for the ludicrous election lies, have a longstanding firm base. It's indeed how it's going to be for the foreseeable future, and better to acknowledge it now than to figure out how to act accordingly. That's why it's so important not to try to fight this with, well, you said the election was stolen and the illegals vote, but we looked at millions of votes and there was only like 5 cases of election fraud. That's not the point. The point is they're doing it.
Yeah.
Don't confuse me with data like you can only find 4. I know in my gut it's happening. How else could you win? I mean, you're fighting one, argument with a whole. It's an emotional appeal to what should be, which is never going to be countered by, well, here are the facts.
Well, it is amazing how long the project's been underway. As we said, it has its roots in George W. Bush's term. I mean, that was the way they played it post 9/11. You were either you're with us or you're against us, and if you oppose either the invasions or the war,
and we'll have to rename France.
Yeah, right.
It's freedom for us now, and that's really important to do because, you're with us or you're against us, and that's why it's so important coming to 2021 that Gavin Newsom run specifically and openly against that.
I think that's true.
And win.
Yeah, well, geez.
Because he has to say,
winning.
Look, I'm running against Larry Elder, who represents this that I just described from Thomas Zimmer. And you don't want that. You can't have that. The majority of Californians don't want that. And so let me tell you openly what you'd get if he won. I'm running against him. Vote for me. That is a very effective strategy. And it's way more effective than, look, here's a laundry list of the things that I've done to help COVID.
Yes, that is true.
Who cares?
Right. At that point, no one will. Yeah.
It is what it is, and we're still not over it, so you didn't succeed in tamping it down entirely. Yes, but see this other guy over here? He is going to do these horrible things. You don't want that. You need to vote for me. Okay, well, that one I'll buy.
Yeah. What they do afterwards, still a little bit up in the air. But that's the way to win the election, certainly, and that's step one.
I mean, look, never make heroes of politicians. They're politicians.
Yeah.
Right? They're not philosopher kings. I don't expect, them to be the perfect embodiment of everything that I want. But I know damn well Larry Elder is the soul and substance of everything I don't want. And so absolutely, if I were in California, I'd be voting no on that recall because I don't want Larry Elder and what he represents. And, Democrats across the country need to run on that.
Yep. Well, they ought to. Man, I was just thinking about how long ago there were Republican politicians all over the place running on the whole Real America thing. I mean, that's going on 15 years old. The idea of
that's
declaring...
Sarah Palin stuff. And I recall, but recall can be tricky. So it's always better to go back and look and find the exact reference. Situations where you'd say, look, this is dangerous and this is bad, and look at John McCain saying, no, ma'am, he's not an Arab, Obama. He's like a regular American, just like you and me, and praising him for it. And saying, this stuff is really starting to get out of hand with this Sarah Palin Real America stuff. Well, you're exaggerating. You're radically exaggerating what's going on here for your own political benefit. No, actually, I'm talking about what I'm seeing with my eyes here and figuring out that, if you can see the pattern, this is not going to be good. Well, you're exaggerating. Nobody's saying you're exaggerating anymore. Not after Trump, not after January 6th.
Right. Although it seems like another one of those examples of the dirty effing hippies being right again, where things that worry me about running, against other Americans and, declaring Democrats to be un-American in general. And at the time, as we're fighting the war on terror and opening the prison camp in Guantanamo, very quickly became Democrats
and for
should be
torture.
sentenced. Yeah.
Which is what it was when we
Guantanamo.
said it was.
Yes.
You're exaggerating. No.
Right.
It's torture.
Yeah, I know. Certainly I have personal experience with, not with the torture, thank God, but with, confronting the idea of calling it torture and having people saying, oh my God, you're so crazy. You hippies, unbelievable. Where are you getting the idea that it's torture? Well, from
That's
fact.
because it's torture.
But yeah. But we were talking about the Real America thing and it being Sarah Palin. That was George Allen's campaign platform even before we got Sarah Palin.
Right.
2 years
Real
before
America
we ever
versus
discovered who
Macaca.
she was. Right. I mean, this stuff is going on 20 years old in the most explicit form of calling Democrats something other than Americans. And, it worried us a great deal at the time. Not only the things that the Bush administration was doing and the people it was torturing, but the things that were potentially in the offing, giving the president at the time broad powers to sort of unilaterally declare who would be considered terrorists or what would they call them, the enemy combatants, and very quickly finding that the Republican base was in favor of the idea of declaring domestic political opposition to be enemy combatants, and that, it was very popular rhetoric, whether it be on the Rush Limbaugh show or elsewhere.
Laws that say it's okay to run them down with cars.
Yeah, well, now it is. Yeah, right. It's now developed into something quite explicit, which was all the things that people said, well, you know where this is going to end up. No, it won't. Believe me, we can tell the difference between you and those crazy Arabs. Well, I'm sure that you can, but that's not your intention. Yeah, right. You're exaggerating.
I can tell the difference, but I don't intend to tell the difference.
Right. And then, of course, it becomes
car's a car and a pedestrian's a pedestrian, and that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. And now you can run people over. You can invalidate the election of Democrats because brown people voted for them. Anyone who votes for a Democrat was cheating. Yeah, and finally culminating in, a president of the United States inciting an insurrection against Congress and, walking free thereafter, by the way.
Right. Well, George Allen lost that election. And Sarah Palin lost hers.
Yep.
And it looks like Larry Elder's going to lose his.
And yet,
so,
20 years of that rhetoric.
It's not gone. That doesn't make it go away. But nothing focuses the mind like losing. And so let's get some mind focusing done as of tomorrow, because that's officially end of election day.
Okay. But I think it's theirs. Yeah. If they lose, it's supposed to focus their minds. However, that doesn't mean we can't focus our minds when they lose, too.
Well, you have to keep winning. I mean, That's really the message for Democrats. You can't rest on your laurels and say, well, George Allen lost, therefore we're done. Obviously, we're not.
That's definitely true. That's been a part of my message, is that not only can you never rest, it's because you can never lose. That's because we've found over the last 20, 30 years, the rule of law only applies when Democrats are in charge and are the ones supposed to be enforcing it. When Republicans are in office, there is no such thing where they have the power to do
it's the whole
this.
idea of anything that Democrats do is by definition illegitimate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's just a different
so it all comes
iteration
full circle. Anyway, that's my rant for today.
All
right. To summarize everything that happened over the weekend.
Well, at least George Bush is great now.
He gave a great speech. It doesn't make him great.
That is true. But lots of criticism of that mindset too over the weekend. I don't know anybody that really thinks, wow,
no big
he's
deal.
good
Nobody
now.
really lost their cookies over it.
It's just Twitter activity, and all right.
I'm glad he said what he said. I think it was important.
Sure.
I don't think it was covered enough.
Right? I mean, it's usable, so we should use it.
Yeah.
Fine by me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, well, that is fine. And off the air, we talked about, and I can cover it if you need to run, but certainly, I don't know. Had you caught wind at all of the Melania Trump story before airtime?
Nothing whatsoever. Didn't even see it pass.
I mean, it's not important because it's Melania Trump, but, because we because we gossip on Twitter.
Well,
That's
I'll leave that
happening.
one for you.
Okay, I can take care of it. And in fact, Bill did in his morning tweet, so I can use that as a big segue. And we'll go from there. All right, everybody go get a vaccine or something. I'll have to tell my J&J recipient. Maybe October break would be a good time to. Will he be eligible then? How far does it say anywhere how long you have to wait after getting Johnson & Johnson before getting another one, or they just say go right on?
No, I mean right now we're talking 5-6 months because that's what the data says. I think the feds are recommending 8 months, but if you look at the data in terms of when the antibodies start to go down, 5 months or more seems legitimate. And since there's no specific recommendation and you're making it up on the fly,
and we're lying.
I would say 5 months or more.
Okay. How much should I lie about, I guess is the question. Or
I can't answer that for you.
Right. Of course not. That would be unethical.
Yes, it's an ethics
question. In fact, I didn't even ask you, so that's fine.
And yeah, right. And I didn't even answer, so I think that's all good.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg, for not answering.
Take care.
Okay. We'll see you on Wednesday.
There's an article about how people lie, just for information purposes only.
I bet there's one out there. Anyway, yes, and before anybody forgets...
oh my fucking God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking
just
I love that.
Just that.
Thank you so much for playing that. I hope you play that every day.
I think I will. It was a great idea.
Even when you're not on the air.
Yeah, I did it at home. Hey, everybody, listen to this. Wow.
I called David on his answering machine. I got this message.
That should be it.
We should sell it.
You've reached, Never mind who you reached. All right, well, we could do it. Right, you could be on, Cameo with that now.
Something like that. All righty, Take care. Talk to you Wednesday.
Very good. See you then.
Just get the freaking vaccine already, okay?
No, right? Everybody thinks so. So, Melania Trump. I will use this as the segue. We saw, you perhaps saw, if you're awake and listening live, you might have seen Bill's morning tweet. And he picked up on this latest crazy thing right away, saying an hour ago, of course, the Kagro in the Morning is live now. And then he says, he texted Melania to ask if she'd cancel her latest photo shoot with a rug to listen as Kagro X, that's me, I'm talking to you now, brings her the latest news and commentary. She texted back, no. And that's where we're just plain no. That's the story. Again, I mentioned off the air to Greg, and basically I offered him this thing, and then he's like, yeah, we probably won't be talking about that because it doesn't really matter. It's Melania Trump, and so therefore, who cares? But let's see. Where is, I'll find it. I guess Stephanie Grisham, who is the former top aide to Melania Trump, with whom she had a falling out right about the time when there was no work left because they were leaving the White House, but has since vowed to write a tell-all book, and I guess has now done it, and now they're excerpting it in the various newspapers. I don't know, part of it must have gotten leaked to Politico, perfect outlet for this sort of thing. And I imagine will be reported on later in the New York Times because Ken Vogel, who is a New York Times reporter, has this tweet linked to the Politico story. Soon after the rioters broke through the Capitol barricades on January 6th, Stephanie Grisham texted Melania Trump, "Do you want to tweet that peaceful protests are the right of every American, but there is no place for lawlessness and violence?" Melania responded, "No." That's it, just no. And, that's kind of an interesting response, to say the least. And I think I actually picked up on it earlier, another tweet, actually a reaction to a Kyle Cheney tweet about the same subject from Justin Hendricks, who just was like, no, that's it. That's your whole response. I just can't believe that's all you have to say about it. Let me see. Maybe I'll just use the Politico link. We might as well just read the damn thing here from Politico's playbook, which, everyone loves / hates. Grisham dishes on Melania. Rachel Bade, Ryan Lizza, Tara Palmieri, and Eugene Daniels. All four of them had to read this story and write about it, I guess. Where it is. I guess that's happening. And then what, do they have they got an audio file on it, but do they... No, okay. Here's the write-up part of it here. Starts off with the old be best hashtag. You remember when Melania had that, right? Be best. Don't be mean on social media, or don't be bad on social media. Of course, don't also use social media to tamp down on violence, because I'm busy. Sometimes it seems that everything has already been said about the Trump years, though not everyone has said it. In the latter camp is Stephanie Grisham, the former Trump White House press secretary, best known for never holding a press briefing. Is that right? I think I'm thinking of somebody completely different. The other Stephanie, right? Wasn't it? Stephanie Grisham, I forgot about entirely, to be honest. But wasn't it Stephanie like Wolfson or Wolfington Howell the Third or whatever? What was the woman who was actually... well, I can't remember. And thankfully the... break is coming up, and I can look up what her name was, but maybe it wasn't even Stephanie. I don't know. But the woman who was, in fact, an aide to Melania. This is the White House press secretary, which makes it even worse. But let's see if I can squeeze more of this in on the way out. All right, Stephanie Grisham, the White House press secretary, best known for never holding a press briefing. Now Grisham is breaking her silence, which included her term in office, apparently. And Politico's Daniel Lippman emails us with a scoopy preview of her forthcoming tell-all. At 1:25 on January 6th, soon after rioters had broken through the barricades outside the Capitol, Melania Trump received a text message from her then Chief of Staff, Stephanie Grisham. Do you want to tweet that peaceful protests are the right of every American, but there's no place for lawlessness and violence? Grisham asked the First Lady. And the answer, one word, no. There's a little bit more about that, but that ends the story. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Stephanie Winston Wolkoff is the name of the other Stephanie related or connected in history with Melania Trump, who also, I think, wrote a tell-all book or told all to somebody in a deposition or something. But she was the one that I think ended up getting thrown under the bus, or they attempted to throw her under the bus for all the grifting and stealing that was going on with the inaugural funds. But she didn't want to stand for it and is instead offering testimony against all the rest of them. But this Stephanie, and it's, I think, an embarrassment for all involved that the two would be confused. Embarrassing, of course, for me to get the names wrong. But probably more embarrassing in all of this is the fact that Stephanie Grisham did so little to distinguish herself as White House press secretary that we can't separate her in our minds from Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, who also basically really did nothing in terms of the West Wing operations. But anyway, they're not the same person, even though it might seem like it, I guess. So there's a little bit more to the Politico write-up. We might as well continue with that, right? So she's asked, do you want to tweet that, everybody has the right to protest, but let's not get crazy out there. The answer, a minute later, Melania replied with a one-word answer, no. At that moment, she was at the White House preparing for a photo shoot of a rug she had selected, according to exclusive excerpts of Grisham's forthcoming book, I'll Take Your Questions Now, which she never did, what I saw in the Trump White House, obtained by Politico. That is interesting. I guess if she never had a press briefing, then when did she ever say, I'll take your questions now? And it's hard to know exactly. I'm not a White House reporter. I didn't really see what was going on at the time. And every once in a while, the White House reporters complain, well, you're not having a press briefing, but you're having what they call they have other dumb names for the various things you're doing, like a gaggle, in which the White House press secretary stands there and takes questions from the press corps and answers them, sometimes poorly. And then they go back and they say, well, she hasn't had a press briefing ever. and so that's bad. I mean, did she also not do gaggles? I have no idea. And if that were the case, I mean, you'd think there would be more writing about how ridiculous is it that you call your book "I'll Take Your Questions Now," when you would never take our questions. But she probably took questions. Anyhow, I don't know. Everybody seems disingenuous to me in all of this, including the press corps complaining about her. But, so, yeah, I mean, she was doing her job there, trying to get... It's interesting that did she bother approaching the guy who was allegedly president of the United States to say, you want to do this? And she was rebuffed, so she went to the first lady. Do you want to tweet that peaceful protests are the right of every American, but there is no place for lawlessness and violence? A minute later, no. And no answer as to why why you would say no. But apparently, I guess she's trying to imply that Melania was so distracted by the rug photo shoot. But also, by the way, who effing cares that you bought a rug? Ever. Much less that you bought it on January 6th and there's 2 weeks left in your term. But I guess, you want to document. I'm the one who got this rug for the White House, this beautiful, beautiful rug. And I wish I had pictures of the rug because I'd like to see it, because I'm thinking about the way she decorated for Christmas a couple times. And I mean, like, it's a rug. Like, what kind of rug? A nice oriental carpet of some kind. Are we not supposed to say, or when you're talking about carpet, is it still okay to say oriental, but maybe not? I don't know. That's how it used to be. That's what the signs still say outside of the rug stores. So, maybe they're wrong. But what do you call it? I don't know. I mean, I guess you've got to find out what you should be doing it by the country of origin anyway. All the connoisseurs probably are referring to them by country of origin. Persian rugs? Is that even out? I got no idea. Anyway, this is actually a rug that's decorated with pictures of Vlad the Impaler, I believe, is what she chose. Very Christmassy, But what does she have to say about this? Grisham, a years-long Trump loyalist who resigned within hours of that text exchange. Oh, yes, I remember that, right? Very virtuous resignation in the face of the insurrection. Also writes that she asked Melania a couple of times whether she should reach out to Jill Biden during the transition to set up the traditional inauguration tea. But instead of setting up the meeting, Melania told her that they, quote, that they should, quote, see what the West Wing does. The reason, according to Grisham, Melania, like her husband, believed the election was illegitimate. Well, okay. That, I think, follows from being married to him and, living through all the rest of his insane BS. I mean, you can be married to somebody and not buy into that, but whatever. That's part of the package. Let's see. A statement provided by the office of Melania Trump, and there is one, said, the intent behind this book is obvious. It is an attempt to redeem herself after a poor performance as press secretary. Maybe true. Failed personal relationships. Why that's in there, I have no idea, because you're a mean girl. And unprofessional behavior at the White House, like pointing out failed personal relationships. That's okay. Be best. Through mistruth and betrayal, she seeks to gain relevance and money. Is that a problem in Trump world? At the expense of Mrs. Trump. That's the problem in Trump world, right? At the expense of a Trump. You can't have that. Her mention of failed personal relationships, this is a parenthetical comment, appears likely to be a reference to Grisham's past relationship with former Trump aide Max Miller, who no one remembers. Citing 3 people familiar with the incident, Politico magazine reported in July that the relationship, quote, ended when he pushed her against a wall and slapped her in the face in his Washington apartment after she accused him of cheating on her. He denied the allegation. What a failed relationship. Remember that time where you got slapped by him? Fail. All right. Well, she's a captive woman, Melania, and so she's going to be, and she didn't write any of her responses either. Not that she's not responsible for them, but I mean, she probably added that in there. What do you think of this, Melania? What were we going to say? Oh, yes, right. The intent behind this book is obvious. It's an attempt to redeem herself after a poor performance as press secretary and unprofessional behavior at the White House. Yes, and also, failed personal relationships. I don't know what her accent is really like because no one ever listens to her. Look, here's a mention of the other Stephanie here. On January 11th, Melania did issue a statement saying she was, quote, disappointed and disheartened by what happened last week. Wow, take your time. But she added that she found it, quote, shameful that surrounding these tragic events there has been salacious gossip, unwarranted personal attacks, and false misleading accusations on me, about me, right, directed at me, on me, from people who are looking to be relevant and have an agenda. What command of the English language. I mean, it is her second, third, fourth, fifth language, but, she represents the Speak English party. She seemed to be referring to her former close friend Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, the other Stephanie. Maybe she confused the two of them. Who penned an op-ed in the Daily Beast a few days earlier arguing that Melania, quote, was complicit in the destruction of America, which she was. Grisham joined the Trump campaign in 2015 and, despite her misgivings, remained with the White House until close to the end, which is why we don't really care about her resignation, her virtuous resignation. She writes that Melania's response to her text on January 6th, quote, broke her, since she had long defended the First Lady against accusations that she was a Marie Antoinette-type dilettante. Well, you shouldn't have done that. It was very dumb of you. Now, Grisham writes, she sees Melania like, quote, the doomed French queen, dismissive, defeated, detached. Which brings me back to the dirty effing hippies were right again, and Grisham, you were wrong the whole time. But now that you've been thrown under the bus, from under the bus, it's easy to see that the dirty effing hippies were right. I don't know. Though it shouldn't be a huge surprise that Melania stood by her husband on important questions like the election, Grisham writes in the book that she was, quote, shocked to learn that Melania seemed to share Donald Trump's view that the election was rigged, because probably Grisham didn't believe that Donald Trump believed it. So, I mean, if you don't believe Donald believes it, then you would probably not believe that Melania believes it. But if he's making it his public position to say he believes it, then yeah, you better believe that Melania is going to say it too. Melania told Grisham that, quote, something bad happened and that the election results weren't legitimate. She didn't listen to Grisham when she tried to explain to her that there are small irregularities in elections, but that there was no grand conspiracy to unfairly remove Trump from office, according to the book. Grisham's book is scheduled to be released October 5th. A publishing source said that, quote, Stephanie knows she's stirred up a hornet's nest with this book. We're going to say it anyway, even if she hasn't. It includes potentially unflattering nuggets. Really, nuggets are unflattering all the time. Are there flattering nuggets? Nuggets is just one of those words. It's like, I think you get no further than neutral when you've got nuggets to discuss. But anyway, it includes potentially unflattering nuggets about other officials with whom Grisham tangled during her time in the White House, according to the source. Among them are Jared Kushner, he sucks, and is a nugget, and Mark Meadows, another nugget, who removed her as White House press secretary, the person said. She didn't resign, I guess. Oh boy, now we have that controversy. Stephanie has secrets about Trump that even the First Lady doesn't know, the source said. Secrets that he doesn't want her to know. They will be in this book. They're probably about pervert stuff. Since news of the book broke last week, numerous Trump world figures have contacted Grisham to see how they're depicted in the book or to offer private messages of support. According to the source, Grisham, who is very familiar with how the Trumps operate, is also bracing for a potential smear campaign and legal fight if anyone sues to try to prevent publication. She knows, the source says, that there's a hunt on to try to get a copy of the book to the Trumps. He can't read. She's received calls from people she barely knows asking for an early copy. Which I guess then you can say, I don't feel bad about saying F you because I barely know you. Anyway, typical hype, and I don't know how much of it is really true, but, about the book and who's contacting her and whether they're trying to stop her or not. But I don't really have much doubt about, the likelihood of that exchange. Do you want to tweet something to try to calm people down? No? Okay, I didn't think so. All right, let's see. Other things worthy of discussion, I guess. There's Linda Chapman weighing in some 12 minutes ago with the actual answer. I guess while I was Googling it during the break. But credit to you, Linda, for remembering who the hell I was talking about, Stephanie Winston Wolcott. And let's see, what else have we got here? Some other comments. Seth Chipman, who says, is there any way to tease out the extent to which French Laundry impacted the recall movement. I remember recall Newsom signs pre-COVID. I don't know. I wouldn't be the one to ask about that because I didn't know what the hell the French Laundry was. I mean, I figured it was laundry. Also, I'd never heard of the controversy either because I just, California, other end of the country, they're crazy over there. They're constantly recalling their governors. I don't know. But tell me what happens with the recall election. So I don't know anything about French Laundry. Not the kind of place I know anything about. I understand my mom tells me over the weekend, how could you not know the French Laundry? It's a super famous restaurant. I go to IHOP for New Year's Eve. I'm not a restaurant guy. I like, people say, how could you not be a foodie these days? Hey, I like food, I get jokes. I like food. And I like, interesting and cool food too. I'm just not a restaurant person. That I'm definitely not. And if somebody tells me there's a restaurant that's impossible to get a reservation at, like some people go like, I'm going to see if I can use my influence to get a reservation. And then everyone will think I'm cool. People tell me this restaurant is impossible to get a reservation at. I go, well, one, I wasn't looking to go to any restaurant. Certainly not now. But even pre-COVID, I'd just say, okay, well, that's a place where if somebody says to me, do you want to try to go to this place? I would say no, because it's impossible to get a reservation, I heard. And I don't want one because it's impossible. I don't want the trouble of trying to get one. The food could be amazing. If somebody else makes a reservation, wants to take me there, that's great. But yeah, I'm like, I never feel, the challenge of getting into this restaurant is now something I want to take on. I just say, that's a waste of time for my life. I'm not doing that. So I don't know. I just figured more, I think the fact that I didn't know about it and the fact that I said, well, that seems very Californian to care about this thing was more like, I figured Californians would know the restaurant because, even if you don't know anything about restaurants and you don't follow that stuff, I mean, there's a whole world that follows it, like, fandoms for restaurants and chefs, etc. And I'm not in it. And so I don't know. But I figure local-ish, California. You could be on the other end of the state and have nothing to do with it. But, you get the idea. Somebody's going to come and visit California, a friend of yours, and they say, I'm going to go to New York, and then I'm going out there to LA and San Francisco, and I don't know, whatever other stops, and we're going to come and see you. But where should I go to, dinner if I'm in, I don't know what town French Laundry is in. That place, that town, maybe some of the best restaurants or the most famous restaurants. I don't even know though. Around here in Washington, I know there's, some downtown restaurants that are hot spots, for like political people and the various steakhouses and the Capitol Grill and Les Halles and, I don't know. And, various famous restaurants. What do I know? I know beyond the Tavern on the Green, Russian Tea Room, Four Seasons Hotel has like great restaurants or whatever. That's all I know. Otherwise, there's some famous TV chefs that I guess have good restaurants because otherwise, how famous could they be? But yeah, the French Laundry, nope, not on my radar in the least. It's not in my state. Maybe I would know if I lived in that city or that state. That's why I figured it was a California thing. I don't know whether there's any way to tease out the impact, though. I don't think anybody really did any polling on it because it just didn't seem to rise to that level, but it probably did have something to do with it. It was a thing that people could latch onto. But just generally, it's never really that hard to get a critical mass of Californians to say they resent the person who's governor there, no matter what they're doing. And if you give them a bad sounding story, and that is a bad sounding one. Well, for one thing, it's a terrible name for a restaurant, laundry, and for another, French, which makes it sound hoity-toity, and I guess it is, so it works. And I don't know. But there might be a way to tease that out in the tell-all book that they eventually write, which I guess they won't because if he wins the recall, everyone will forget the whole thing. Let's see. What other things? Rebecca Roman says, certainly, I think you agree. And I think Seth is saying the same thing here. The effort to recall Newsom predates his dining even at French Laundry, Rebecca says, from Oakland. Which, yeah, I mean, they're recalling Newsom because he's a Democrat. And it worked last time. I mean, why did they recall Gray Davis? A lot of people were, upset about whatever things he may have done. But the way it works is, before anybody realized how dumb their recall law was, don't you hate that thing that a governor did? You wait for him to do something bad, or sometimes not. You just rile up the Republican base and say, well, Democrats are tyrants, obviously. Everybody knows that. We're going to recall him. And you put the recall effort together, and it languishes, and nothing happens, and nobody cares, and only lunatic Republicans sign your petition. And then, a story happens, as will always happen with every governor. Something that is actually genuinely bad happens, or something that somebody can whip up into something that looks like a frenzy over something bad happens. A guy goes to a restaurant that's poorly named, but very famous, and there you go. Now you have the thing. Or, COVID, whatever. So I'm sure that the effort to recall him predates the French Laundry. I'm sure it predates anything he did. The moment how long was it before they had, impeach Biden on the brain? I mean, what's her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying it on prior to his inauguration, saying as soon as he's inaugurated, because of what you're doing to Trump, I'm going to, move to impeach him. I mean, there were impeach Hillary stickers prior to November 2016, whenever all the ones who hated her but who assumed that she was going to win were getting ready to, to try that. So as soon as a Democrat takes office, of course, there's a recall effort. You probably just don't find out about it until there's some number of signatures and somebody writes a story that says, well, they got 10 signatures on it. And what? A recall? Who even knew? I'm sure they filed it day one. Let's see. What other comments do we need to catch up on here? Yeah, I saw this story over the weekend as well. There are many, and Rebecca has a queue of them. There's a raft of stories almost as large as Greg's on any given day. And I thank you for it. Lots of good ideas here. And Ron Filipkowski figures prominently in a lot of them because he's been very active these days and is collecting some unbelievable stories of the lunatics on the other side. Let's see. Any others? Here's an appropriate for the show, obviously. Good morning show bit here from Patrick Snyder, who tweeted over the weekend about a kind of COVID aerosolization that is little discussed, not in this house, but little discussed, not without reason, he says, but still dangerous. And he includes the tweet of Eric Feigl-Ding, whose name we have called before. The tweet, double entendre, the tweet of Eric Feigl-Ding. What is going on here, and what's so little discussed? And we'll see what we can do about changing it from little discussed to into a little disgusting. 99% of what comes out of your butt when you fart, yeah, we're there now, is completely odorless. And that's good news. It's the 1% that you're worried about, of course. It's the 1% that causes the trouble, primarily hydrogen sulfide, says, he cites here, Tweet Sauce, which, never mind, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't know who that is, but that's what they say. But what else is silent but dangerous? And you missed the phrase there, I think, Eric, but just to work on things, what the kids are saying, silent but deadly, and perfectly true when you're talking about coronavirus. But what else is silent but deadly? I have to say it that way. Coronavirus aerosols, say aerosol experts, and underwear is cloth. Now, that's an awfully awkward way of ending it, but it is Twitter, and he ran out of room, and I get what we're saying here, as in terms of if you are masking against the aerosolization of COVID virus and particles through various, effluvia and ejecta. Well, that's, I guess, cloth underwear is no more effective than a cloth mask would be. Though there are people who have been advocating for adding filtration systems to underwear for a long time. But there you go. We've known for a while that you could monitor the danger of community spread of COVID through the sewage system because, people who have it, the virus in their system are going to, shed it in a number of ways, and that's one of them. And if they won't submit to testing or other monitoring, you can at least monitor what's going on in the sewage. So that the part isn't news, but I haven't heard of people discussing it in the fart context, let's say. So, thanks, Patrick. And thanks, Eric, for bringing this to our attention. There's a little bit more here. Bathroom airborne transmission confirmed. Whether breathing or toilet plume or fecal aerosols, doesn't matter. And honestly, it really doesn't, because at that point, I'm sick just thinking about it. But that's a true thing, and I've been thinking about that with the bathrooms. One of the great benefits of the masking, widespread masking in the pandemic, is the ability to, put cloth mask over your face when entering a bathroom. I mean, I think this is a tremendous stride forward in American culture. I have always wanted to have a cloth mask over my face, particularly when entering a public bathroom, and I've frequently done that. I've gone in and, I've there's nobody around here right now. Okay, I will pull my, t-shirt up over my nose and mouth just to have some kind of filtration and some hope that I'm not breathing. Bathrooms are terrible. They really are. Luckily, we're mostly, we've got good antibodies and built up a pretty good immune system, but otherwise they would be poison centers as far as I'm able to tell. Anyway, I probably shouldn't, freelance it here because things will just get worse. Back to Eric Feigelding's telling of it. Bathroom airborne transmission confirmed. They have had it, I guess. Whether breathing, toilet plume, or fecal aerosols, doesn't matter. It stayed in the air for 40 minutes before infecting the next person. Blah. Let's see. Ali Noor and I have been warning about fecal aerosols, and, you got me with that one. Bathroom and septic ventilation for a long time. Blah. All right, what else? He's included the tweet of Dr. Ali Nouri here, who says, evidence for airborne SARS-CoV-2 transmission between two people who visited the same bathroom 40 minutes apart. Now, I don't know how you get that level of detail, but whatever. Conclusion backed up by contact tracing, CCTV, and virus's genomic sequence. So, yeah, you can tell one person giving it to another. That's fine. And contact tracing. CCTV, closed circuit television, which I assume means that they are spotted on their way to the bathrooms in whatever facility this is, and time stamped and all of that. That's great. Unless, of course, this happened at Pervalago, in which case the closed circuit TV was in the bathroom, confirming, what they did there as well. Let's see. Eric Feigelding's tweet thread continues here with number 3 here. Having finished number 2, we're on to number 3. Tweet number 3. Many past examples of fecal aerosol transmission. Patrick, you're murdering me. I don't feel good. Many past examples of fecal aerosol transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, such as in large high-rise buildings that share toilet drainage pipes between two different apartments or condo units. What a disaster. Yes, the graphic is quite graphic, but that's why photos are worth 1,000 words. Oh, my God, and I'm afraid to tell you what the words are, the 1,000 that we have. He's retweeting his own earlier tweet that says, fecal aerosol transmission recognized? Yes. 9 infections in 3 families due to vertically shared toilet drainage pipes and aerosols from pipes. So somebody else in the apartment above you has it and flushes the toilet, and it creeps up through the pipes out of your toilet. Oh my God. Oh, it's like the stuff of nightmares. How did they prove it? Well, to prove it, tracer gas was released into drainage systems and shown to come out of the other apartment. Fecal airborne is real. Yikes. Well, I won't read the rest of that particular thread, but there's more to this one. I'm going to have to preview it over the next 2 minutes and see whether our stomachs can take it. Tracer gas. I think we've had enough of that. Boy. All right. Happy Monday to you. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's so much fart jokes, so much fart humor that could be made, but I think we can wrap this thing up. I'll make just a few more points out of this thread, which is to say that this has happened before, and epidemiologists, I guess, have been aware of this possibility for some considerable amount of time. Let's see. I need to put some of these other things aside for later consideration. Sorry. But anyway, he mentions in the 8th tweet about COVID farts, I guess, basically. Just like during the old SARS high-rise outbreak in Hong Kong in 2003, this fecal aerosol outbreak again happened in February of 2020 during Hong Kong's first wave in another Hong Kong high-rise. History repeats. We don't learn from the past until things that proverbially hit the fan, in fact, do so. The high-rise, until the, that stuff hits the high-rise septic pipe. So there you go. There's a whole expert analysis of all this and diagrams of how it works and everything. And then wrapping up the thread, yesterday's news. Well, this can't be good. Video of sewage, a sewage pipe that broke at FedEx Field, which is the home stadium of the Washington Breadsticks. And during the game, pouring sewage down on whatever section it happened to be under this pipe. And people basically, if you listen to the video, everybody scatters and runs away, and they're looking at it in disbelief, like, will this stop? And can we go back and sit in our seats and watch the game? Until some people in the neighborhood there begin to realize, that smells bad, and in a familiar way, and they remark on, that's crap right there. That's not what they say. Pouring out. The water is clear-ish looking, but the smell gives it away. So there you go. A whole section of Washington football fans who will go home with infections, possibly. And, you know who to sue. Not me. Stephanie Grisham, I guess, is who you can sue over that. So, all right. That's that's some remarkable news, to say the least. I got a bunch of other stories out there as well to catch up on, and not a whole lot of time to use them all. So let's see. First of all, I guess it being Monday, I don't know how long this news will wait. I have to mention the fact that over the weekend there was news, which I think was even a couple of days old by the time I heard it, that there was a pack of zebras roaming free somehow in the DC suburbs. crazy story, but sometimes animals get out of zoos or whatever, shelters or I don't know, where people keep exotic pets. They get out, everybody marvels over it for a while, Twitter goes crazy for it, et cetera, et cetera. But this was the case. Zebras in the D.C. suburbs. Now, I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but then all of a sudden, I saw that there were zebras, and like seconds later, I see headlines, and I have to check. Is this like from a parody site or anything? But the HuffPost was tweeting around, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton denies setting zebras free in D.C. suburbs. And I can't figure out whether that's her like good-naturedly responding to some jokey kind of a story, or whether anybody actually said, yeah, and Stephanie Grisham did it. Eleanor Holmes Norton did it. I don't know how Stephanie got back into this, but that's what it says. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who is of course a delegate from D.C., delegate, not a representative, no voting rights outside of in the House of Representatives, not on the floor. She can usually under Democratic control. She can vote in the committee of the whole House, but never mind all of that. On Friday, she denied responsibility for setting 6 zebras free in a D.C. suburb, but said she wished them well. Okay. Local news has reported that the zebras were let loose on Saturday or Sunday of last weekend. So they've been out there for a week by the time I heard about it. A period of time during which I was enjoying quiet time at home with family, Norton said in a statement. My alibi is solid. I don't even know if she's kidding. The D.C. delegate was referring to reports last weekend that zebras were roaming freely in Prince George's County, Maryland. The zebras, it's unclear whether it was 5 or 6, escaped from a privately owned farm permitted to keep them. Norton said a member of the public accused her of letting the zebras free by pointing out that she has historically valued the principle of consent of the governed. What? So what? Or the philosophy that a government's right to use state power is justified only when consented to by the people or the society over which that political power is exercised. Yeah. Norton said it's true that she values that philosophy, particularly in her fight for D.C. statehood. She added that she opposes unnecessary fences, too. For those reasons, Norton said, she can see why someone would accuse her of setting the zebras free, but it's not true. And I don't know how to read that paragraph exactly. For those reasons, Norton said she can see why someone would accuse her of setting the zebras free. I can't. And then the next sentence is, but it's not true. So it's not true. She means it's not true that she set the zebras free. I think it means it's not true that she can see why someone would accuse her of setting the zebras free. Because I can't. So she might be able to, or she could just be lying. I could see why someone would accuse me of that, but it's not true. No. I can understand why the charge was made. I cannot, said the D.C. delegate. I hope the owners find the zebras and that all involved live long, full lives. I mean, I don't think she's wishing death on anybody over the zebra release, or death to the zebras for that matter. The zebras are currently living their lives in people's backyards and along roads in Prince George's County. Now, is the owner not rounding them up? I don't know. I thought for a while this could be some sort of brilliant guerrilla marketing campaign for like a beech nut fruit stripe brand of ivermectin or something like that, but it doesn't appear to be the case. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe they're on the lookout for ivermectin. Is there zebra formulation of ivermectin? Can you give them the horse formulation? I am a little curious about some of these things, but I don't know. That was in the news, and if I wait, I mean, it's not important. But if I do it on Tuesday, like it was already a week old when I found out about it. So I felt like we needed to say something about it. All right. There's more other things. And a lot of them. Let's see. Probably among the most important are... Dang, there's a lot. All right. This news I have as reported by Rolling Stone. For whatever reason. I think there might have been another source on this, but this is the one I managed to find. Biden tells top Democrats he's preparing lobbying blitz on filibuster reform. and voting rights. That sounds like good news. Andy Kroll is the reporter at Rolling Stone. I hope it turns out to be true. They've had a rough ride on a couple of big stories. I don't think this one is untrue. The president, sources say, has promised to lean on centrists to change the filibuster rules and save Democrats' imperiled effort to pass a new voting rights bill. That, of course, would be very important and necessary. Also part of the weekend saga. Joe Manchin, I guess, spent Sunday touring the Sunday shows to give his spiel about, no, I'm not going to change the filibuster, and I'm also against the reconciliation package at the price tag of $3.5 trillion because big price tag, make me look bad, angry, want to look independent, whatever. He couldn't really articulate a reason why he was opposed to all of that, but he says he is. And they tried to nail him down. Is it the price tag? What price tag would you put on it? He tried to pretend he didn't have a price tag in mind, but he didn't object too hard when people said, what would you do, like a 1.5 trillion? And, that might be where he lands. I don't know. But basically, he just wants to look independent and like he fought against big spending Washington because, he can't name anything he wants to cut. This is the long story. It's been ongoing for a long time. Yada, yada. So, I'm glad that they brought this up and, he's going to stand in the way of this thing, then they really should work on it. But, even the problem is there, if you got rid of the filibuster, one, he'd have to cooperate in getting rid of the filibuster. And two, even if he got rid of the filibuster, you'd still need his vote to pass things with a bare majority. So there's a lot of work to do, but I'm glad that, according to this report anyway, Biden has realized that, he's going to have to step out and tell people what he wants and push people on this stuff. And it makes sense. I mean, one of the first things Biden did when he joined the Senate was cast his vote in favor of changing the filibuster rules. At that point, it was 1975, and they were changing the filibuster rules such that the threshold for cloture was brought down from 2/3, 67, down to the current 3/5 or 60 votes. This was a big reform, and it came because they were finding that 67 was just impossible, and oppositionists of all stripes, it crossed the aisle back then, were finding it too easy. It was becoming too easy to just render the Senate a nullity and take it out of the legislative equation by filibustering. And so, reform was necessary. They didn't go as far as they should have, but they knocked it down to 60 after a compromise, which we've described, I think, in the past. But, Biden was there. It was one of the first things he had to do as a brand new senator elected in 1974, and he cast his vote with the reformers then, and for a long time seemed to forget about it, but I don't know. Now he's back on board. So here's the Rolling Stone reporting on it. With a make or break vote looming in the Senate on a sweeping voting rights and anti-corruption bill, President Joe Biden and his advisors have said in recent weeks that Biden will pressure wavering Democrats to support reforming the filibuster if necessary to pass the voting bill. I saw E.J. Dionne writing on the necessity of it over the weekend. He's quite right, but, again, I now read these things like, oh, well, too bad we're going to lose democracy because some people say that they are dedicated to preserving the filibuster. According to 3 people briefed on the White House's position and its recent communications with outside groups, Biden assured Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that he was ready to push for filibuster reform. Biden's pressure would aim to help Schumer convince moderate Democrats to support a carve-out to the filibuster, a must for the party if it's going to pass new voting protections without Republican votes. According to a source briefed on the White House's position, Biden told Schumer, Chuck, you tell me when you need me to start making phone calls. Sounds good. The Senate returns to work this upcoming week, and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer intends to call a vote on the For the People Act, the most ambitious reform bill in decades, and the Democrats' best shot at countering the wave of state-level GOP voter suppression laws this year. But to get the bill out of Congress, Senate Democrats will almost certainly need to change the filibuster. The procedural tactic, you know what it is. I don't have to describe it to you. Publicly, there are two centrist Democrats who have stated their opposition to changing or abolishing the filibuster, Manchin and Sinema. Activist groups and fellow Democratic senators say Manchin and Sinema are likely the 49th and 50th votes, both on any voting rights legislation and especially on filibuster reforms. Sources say both senators are likely targets for when Biden launches his final push to pass a compromise version of the For the People Act. So we're not yet even talking about reconciliation and the spending bills, and that could be separate, especially if they have a carve-out version. And I'm not abolishing the filibuster across the board, but instead some sort of carve-out, which has been discussed over the past couple of months. There's, of course, much more to the article, but, I think I'll jump out of it at this time and move on. Just sort of want to make you aware of the fact that that's happening and get to a couple of other important stories. Let's see. Where do we go here? Let me jump over to this because this reflects back to earlier discussion with Greg earlier in the show, and we can make a theme out of things. This Mother Jones article by Tim Murphy, who writes under the headline, "The Fight Over the Ground Zero Mosque," relevant both to 9/11 anniversary and our discussion earlier. "The fight over the Ground Zero Mosque was a grim preview of the Trump era." We said that Trumpism has been going on for a long time, right? A decade after 9/11, the future president fanned the flames of anti-Muslim bigotry, writes Tim Murphy, and he makes his argument this way. "There's no one moment that gave us Donald Trump, because his rise was the sum of many afflictions, a susceptibility to fraudsters, a broken media ecosystem, a failing ruling class, white grievance politics, the arbitrariness of state boundaries in the Midwest. The man himself may be extraordinarily shallow, but the forces that brought him to power are historically complex. Still, there's one incident I always circle back to when I think about not just the last few years of American politics, but the last 2 decades. The 2010 fight over the construction of an Islamic center in Lower Manhattan. First things first, the Cordoba House, or perhaps Cordoba House, as the project was initially called, it later took on the more innocuous name of Park 51, was never just a mosque, and it was never actually being built at Ground Zero. When Sharif El-Gamal, a New York City real estate developer, went scouting for space in Lower Manhattan, he settled on a spot 2 long blocks away in an old Burlington coat factory on Park Place. El-Gamal, or Jamal perhaps, G-A-M-A-L, El-Jamal, is the son of a Catholic mother and Muslim father, envisioned a community space with a mosque, sure, but also a fitness center, a food court, a daycare, and an auditorium spread out over more than a dozen floors. It would even include a memorial to 9/11. But in August of 2010, the details of the project weren't the point. As the white rage of the Tea Party boiled over that summer, conservative activists and politicians simply saw an opportunity. And so, the Ground Zero Mosque was born. Glenn Beck connected it to the specter of Sharia law, and that definitely deserves a dramatic music rendering. Other opponents, after perhaps a cursory amount of Googling, concluded that naming the project the Cordoba House was an homage to the Muslim conquest of Spain more than a millennium earlier. In other words, that this was a way of declaring 9/11 a great Islamic victory. The organization Al-Jamal was working with on the center, the Cordoba Initiative, considers the name an homage to the history of religious intermingling in that city. The usual suspects fanned the flames. Fox News host Greg Gutfeld said he was going to open a gay bar next to the site to troll the Muslims who would come to worship. I'm sure that was his reasoning for opening a gay bar. Just to troll people. The New York Post, which covered the whole saga with glee, allowed at one point that it was possible, maybe even likely, that the project was entirely peaceful. Gee whiz, thanks. possible, maybe even likely, and some of them, I'm sure, are good people. A reporter for Fox's New York affiliate chased El-Jamal through the street, asking, "Sharif El-Jamal, why won't you talk to us, sir? Why are you running?" Local outlets reported on El-Jamal's previous arrests and delinquent property taxes, like Trump. Delinquent property taxes suddenly becoming a subject of national political importance. But with Congress in recess and the ascendant Tea Party in the news, other mainstream outlets piled on too, allowing, not for the first or last time, the anger of conservative activists to serve as a sort of assignment editor. For a time that August, in the heat of the congressional midterms, the Cordoba House was the biggest story in America. Republicans used it as a bludgeon against everyone else, and plenty of Democrats found it easier to fall in line than to fight back. Harry Reid came out against the project. So did Howard Dean. So did Joe Lieberman, to no one's surprise. Several New York Democratic congressmen opposed it as well. Polls showed a majority of Manhattanites supported the project, but nationally it faced overwhelming bipartisan opposition. Now, if you're building it in Manhattan and Manhattanites support it, who cares that there's bipartisan opposition elsewhere in the country? You don't build it in your neighborhood. Fine. We're doing it here. Then, as ever, people in other parts of the country were eager to use New York as a prop for their political agendas, but cared little for the people who actually lived there. Sarah Palin, at the time the most prominent Republican politician in America, tweeted out her own call to action. Peaceful Muslims, please refudiate. You remember that? And it was PLS, please. Couldn't even bother to be spelling please. Please refudiate was an easy term to mock, but Palin's message was potent. In North Carolina, a Tea Party nurse named Renee Elmers accused her opponent, 7-term Democratic incumbent Bob Etheridge, of refusing to take a stand against the, quote, Victory Mosque. After footage of Cordoba, the Spanish one, flashed across the screen, she addressed the camera, "We should tell them in plain English, no, there will never be a mosque at Ground Zero." Elmers would go on to win in November as Republicans across the country channeled the Tea Party's rage against this, against President Barack Obama, against everything, into a landslide the nation is still digging itself out from. Elmers, I think, is gone already. Is she finished? Renee Elmers on this show is most famous for having a AR-15 stolen out of her garage because she forgot to lock it up and left it sitting, leaning against the gun safe that she had gone to buy for the thing, and then left the garage open. So she's a real genius. Anyway, yeah, she's been gone since 2017. So I guess she was out after the 2016 elections. Did she lose? I can't remember. Who cares? Or whether she resigned or what. All right. Let me go back to, where were we? Mother Jones, right? Okay. By the middle of August, the project had become an issue of national importance so profound that Obama himself felt compelled to weigh in. Speaking at the White House's Ramadan dinner, he defended the project. It was a simple matter of freedom of worship, he explained. And that was really the issue here, because the Park 51 controversy was not just the story of one development in Manhattan. Park 51 got the biggest headlines, but there were efforts to block the opening of mosques and Islamic centers in Tennessee, in California, in Kentucky, in Wisconsin, and elsewhere. There were incidents of vandalism and arson. In towns and cities across the country, the freedom of Muslims to worship was treated not as something enshrined in the Constitution, but as a matter of legitimate political debate, the kind of thing citizens could simply decide to stop if they were loud enough, and they were really effing loud. You shouldn't be surprised to learn that Trump managed to fit himself into the story that summer, leaking to the press a letter he'd written offering to buy the Park 51 property from El-Jamal, which, by the way, of course, if you believe that they're all terrorists, would just be terrorist financing, but never mind all of that because it's okay if you're a Republican. "I am making this offer as a resident of New York and a citizen of the United States, not because I think the location is spectacular, because it's not," he says parenthetically, it's actually in there, "but because it will end a very serious, inflammatory, and highly divisive situation that is destined, in my opinion, to only get worse," he wrote. So I'm doing, it's a selfless thing. I'm a billionaire and I can afford to just pocket change. I'll just buy it and, whatever. I'm sure, whatever. He would, of course, not be taking a loss on the thing. Well, not intentionally. The kind of hostility to religious liberty on display during the Part 51 controversy was considered simply ordinary in Republican politics. A great point. Antagonism toward a major religion, or at least this major religion, wouldn't stop you from getting feted in the national press or booked on Sunday shows. And it certainly wouldn't cost you many votes in the primary. Trump, who in 2015 would propose blocking Muslims from entering the United States entirely, understood that the professions of support for people of faith that undergirded his party did not apply to everyone. Quite the opposite. The opposition to specific groups was a powerful unifying force. The Ground Zero Mosque was the story we didn't really need in 2010, or the story we really didn't need, but a decade later it provides essential context for where we are today. Not just for what it said about the right and where it was headed, but for what it said about other people and institutions too. The development continued, but the Islamic Center hasn't materialized. It's mostly just condos now. On Sunday, Jonathan Greenblatt, the national director of the Anti-Defamation League, formally apologized for his group's prior position that the proposed development should be relocated somewhere else. As the leading anti-hate organization in the U.S. with experts tracking extremism of all sorts, ADL is committed to help our Muslim allies counter Islamophobia, Greenblatt wrote on CNN's website. But as a dear Muslim friend told me recently, ADL's stance on the Cordoba House project was a punch in the gut to the Muslim community. I hope that by righting this wrong, we can be better allies in the fight against the rise in anti-Muslim hate that is coming, and it is coming. It was a notable statement, freely offered, but I couldn't help but notice the forum it was published in. CNN, after all, was also a driver of the controversy. Here's a CNN segment in which reporter Deborah Farrick, is that right, interviewed El Jamal. Farrick saying, plans include a performing arts center, swimming pool, child care facilities, and yes, a Muslim prayer space 2 blocks from the worst terror attack in U.S. history. Why not have a prayer space for Buddhists or Jews or Christians? Or why must it be Muslim? It can't be just a business decision. El Jamal says there are Jewish community centers all over the country. And Farrick says, but the Jews didn't take down 2 towers. There are YMCAs all over the country. But the Christians didn't take down the towers. And this is a need that exists. For those still sensitive and so raw to this, their overriding question is, why here? Why so close? It's 2 blocks. But it was close enough that landing gear ended up on the roof. Why? This was emblematic of the way this real estate project played out in so many news segments. Farrick was just asking the questions, for those still sensitive and so raw to this. In an in-studio appearance on Joy Behar's HLN show, Pamela Geller, an anti-Islam activist, proposed turning the site instead into a center dedicated to the victims of hundreds of millions of years of jihadi wars. Hundreds of millions of years. Behar pushed back, but these were just the kinds of voices mainstream outlets elevated. There was some real human trauma there in some of the reactions from victims' families, but that didn't explain the totality of what was happening and why it ballooned like it did. The national debate was an assertion of who counted and who didn't, a show of strength and power, wrapped up not just in the physical opposition to one group's religious liberty, but in the actions of the people and institutions who, when asked to pick a side, joined the mob. I'll always think of the summer of 2010 and the weaponization of a construction project in Manhattan as a flickering glimpse of things to come. Not just the political potency of foaming prejudice against Muslims, but also the readiness with which those pushing the story were accommodated. That's really true, isn't it? There really was a victory symbol in all of this. There were proponents of a political, there were proponents of a political ideology using a construction project to demonize or demonstrate their power. It just wasn't the people Fox News warned you about. It was the people we were warning you about. Oh, the dirty hippies were right again. Anyway, I decided to dedicate the rest of the show to the completion of that, because it's a completion of the thoughts that we had at the top of the show. But there's still plenty to get to. Tuesday should be a pretty exciting day. Joan McCarter on vacation for the balance of the month, I believe. Good luck and enjoy it. And we'll miss you, but we'll get along just fine, I think. I think we know what you would be talking about, and we'll probably be communicating through the Twitter machines. Nobody's going to be deprived of their Joan McCarter fix elsewhere. It's just here on the show. But okay, I can certainly appreciate the necessity of taking a break from the broadcast every once in a while, but not Justice Putnam. He goes on and on, because the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next. Let's see what he's got on tap here. Of course, there's Joe Manchin news. He says he'll vote no on the $3.5 trillion bill, but he cannot explain why. By the way, maybe we should just put a pause on things for a while, and he should stop going on television if he can't articulate why. But there's more. I'll tell you about after this.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, the trajectory continues. GOP lawmakers are urging their constituents to use violence to push back against the Biden vaccine orders. An inmate on death row for 15 years, exonerated by DNA and released from prison, has died from COVID-19. Boy, we're really doing everybody good here. Stay tuned for that and much more next.